Hello everyone, Godre here, and this is my money brief. Yeah, so on today's money brief, I want to talk about the latest GDP numbers. Yep, so the National Bureau of Statistics just released its GDP numbers, and it's actually good. I mean, it's been a while that we got something good from from the economy in general, but these latest numbers kind of surprised me, though. I mean, I didn't think that we're going to grow this fast. I mean, make no mistakes about it; it's still not as fast as I want. But according to the latest numbers, Nigeria's economy grew in real terms by 3.46%. And that compares to 3.19% recorded in the second quarter of 2024, and of course faster than the 2.98% recorded in the first quarter of 2021. Interestingly, this is also similar to the 3.46 growth that we recorded in the fourth quarter of 2023, and of course faster than the 2.54% recorded in the third quarter of 2023. So again, Nigerian economy grew by 3.46% in Q3 2024. That is at least one of the fastest growth that we've seen since we recorded 3.46% in the fourth quarter of 2023. Nigeria tends to record faster GDP growth rates towards the end of the year. That's the last quarter of the year. And so I suspect that by the time these GDP numbers come out for fourth quarter next year, we might perhaps even see much faster growth. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, how is it that we're growing this fast when it doesn't look like anyone is feeling the economy, right? Things are pretty tough, and nobody understands why, we're growing, at such levels. Now, mind you, GDP basically is comparing everything that is produced in the country one period compared to another period. So everything that was produced in the third quarter of 2024 compared to everything that was produced in the third quarter of 2023. So the difference is typically what you call growth. Now, some would also tell you that, well, you got to adjust for inflation because inflation tends to always inflate prices. So if you don't adjust for inflation, then technically or ordinarily, you would think that everything we produced now, this third quarter of this year, would always be higher than what was produced in the previous quarter, regardless of the price, because of the quantity, because of the price. But in GDP, we're actually looking at how much we've actually produced. Volume really matters. So you adjust for price, and that's why it's called real GDP. And so the real GDP numbers that we're seeing now is 3.46%. So regardless of the inflation that we've seen, that's what this report is saying, the economy did grow, which means a lot more things were produced this quarter compared to the same period last year. So I try to dig into the numbers. I know it's still early days, still a lot to chew in here, but quickly, from what I can see, it appears GDP growth rate this quarter was driven largely by the services sector. So the services sector contributed 53.58% to the country's GDP compared to 58.76% last quarter. And then, of course, agriculture grew took up a huge chunk of the economy at 28.65% compared to 22.61%, which, I mean, is basically the largest that I've seen since the third quarter of 2023, when we did about 29.31%. So looks like we're growing. The agri sector rather seems to be contributing a lot more to GDP than we did now. Where there was a bit of concern for me is industrial sector, so which includes manufacturing and things that production of actual things, like things that we do consume. And from what I can see, that sector shrunk to 17.7% of the economy. So if you aggregate the three, industrial, and services, then you get 100%. So Nigeria is predominantly a service-based economy. More than half of our economy is service-based. And so whenever the service sector does well, the economy tends to also do well. And so that's why if you look at the breakdown of the GDP growth rate itself, and because I was trying to figure out, so what were the sectors that sort of drove it? Like, why did we do this? Well, and it's pretty easy to understand. As you can see from the breakdown, financial services, which is banks, fintechs, and the likes of them, all the organizations that are into financial services, excluding insurance, they recorded the fastest growth last quarter. 31.9%. This sector has been growing in leaps and bounds. So 21.94% in the third quarter of this year. The quarter before, that was the second quarter, they did 33.3%, and then before that 28.8%. Kind of looks like the sector to be in right now is banking and financial services, fintech. These guys are making a kill at the moment. So they are the fastest growing sector in the economy, and perhaps the major reason why we're growing this much. And if you also look at, in terms of where they are in terms of size in the economy, the financial sector itself, as the financial institutions, make up about 8%. They're ranked number 8. I beg your pardon. They're ranked number 8 in terms of sectors that contribute the most to Nigeria's economic growth. So they rank 8. So that means that they're quite high up, and we have we have about 46 of them, 46 subsectors. So they rank 6, and so they rank 8. So when they do pretty well, the economy tends to do well. Now, one other sector that also determines how well the economy does, and when that sector does well, we also do pretty well in terms of GDP wise. Remember, we are over 50% of the economy is service based, and so when this sector also does well, we do well, and that sector is basically telecommunications. So telecommunications also did pretty well. They came in at a modest, I would say, 7th position. They grew by 6.78%. But the size, the telecommunication sector is quite huge. They make up they are number 3 in terms of GDP. And so it's a huge size of a huge part of the Nigerian economy. And so for that reason, when they do well, we also tend to do well. So that sector grew by 6.78%. But in terms of ranking, so it's financial institutions, which is banks and most of these other guys, fintechs, ranked number 1, like I mentioned earlier. Metal ores, pretty small. They were number 2. Insurance sector again ranked number 3 in terms of fastest growing. They grew by 19.81%. A small chunk of the economy. I mean, I'd agree, but they did grow pretty fast. And of course, transportation also seems to be growing. Rail transport did pretty well at 19.68%, and of course, road transport at 17.9%. And then you now have water supply at number 6 here at 9.7%. Telecommunication, like I already mentioned, at number 8. And then telecommunications is actually number 7. Water transport at number 8, and then crude, petroleum, natural gas at number 9. So as you can see, these were the sectors that really drove. Personally, I would think the major drivers of the growth that we're seeing at the moment is telecommunications, financial institutions, and crude oil. So because they've done pretty well, I think the economy has done well in general. I'm sure you're wondering, like, man, I'm not feeling this at all. Things are really tough for me. How can Nigeria be growing at 3.4% when, personally, I'm not growing? But you want to look at what the banks are doing. The banks have been churning out outstanding profits quarter after quarter, beating all odds. And so that justifies that growth that you're seeing. And of course, insurance companies are also doing pretty well as well. And that also justifies the growth that you're seeing. And of course, if you look at the crude oil companies, most of the upstream companies, they are doing extremely well. And so that also explains why we're seeing this growth now. Is this growth good enough? I don't think so, because it's still below population growth rate. We're growing at less than. We're growing at about 5%, but we're in terms of population, while economic wise, we're growing at about 3.4%. Nevertheless, it's still good. We know we can do a lot better considering where we are in the economy, but I think this is one good news that I will put in the bag. I mean, everything can always be negative, so this is actually good. Hopefully, I'm going to do a bit more breakdown as we chew on these numbers. But for now, this is why Nigeria grew at about 3.46% in the third quarter of 2024. That's a money brief for today. As usual, do have a profitable week ahead. Bye.